Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It was a much-needed break. Back in the saddle. Let's get right to it. So, what's everybody talking about today? Probably Lindsey Graham dying, allegedly. Again, I have no reason to believe that he's not dead, but let's get into it a little more specifically here. Again, much to cover in this episode, so I'm certainly not going to take the entire time on Lindsey Graham. However, when things like this happen, as I've certainly made mention of before, if you get on operationq.pub and you type in Lindsey Graham's name, or just the last name Graham, Graham, in the search box, all of the Q posts from the past with Lindsey Graham's name pop up. They are worth reading. There's 28 posts, and I'll do my best to sort of summarize these particular posts and summarize his brief history here. Lindsey Graham entered the Senate in the mid-1990s, if I'm not mistaken. He, of course, was a senator during 9/11, didn't question anything, was always a war hawk, was always a massive neocon, friends with John McCain, XYZ. Hated Donald Trump, ran for president, if you recall, back in 2015. Didn't make it, of course. Bottom of the barrel when it came to presidential candidates. Again, made fun of Donald Trump relentlessly, didn't know who he was, didn't know the operation that was taking place behind Donald Trump, had no clue. Lindsey Graham, again, regarding the war hawk status, he always worked with foreign governments against the interests of the United States, certainly against the Constitution. This would put him in the category of being a traitor, and he was one. This is undeniable. As far as the Q posts go, however, after Donald Trump won, and then in the latter half of 2017, the Q drops started to, of course, come out. People started to read them, pay attention to them, and then, of course, they had to force the question with the media in 2018, in the summer specifically of 2018, to get them to even bring up the Q posts in general. Lindsey Graham still stayed away. But again, during that time, of course, John McCain was executed. Lindsey Graham flipped on John McCain, and then again, basically started to play ball for the good guys and do whatever the good guys wanted Lindsey Graham to do, because Lindsey Graham, again, was compromised. He had been blackmailed in the past. It wouldn't have mattered who was in charge. Lindsey Graham was going to do whatever the person who was in charge wanted Lindsey Graham to do. Lindsey Graham approved Obama's Supreme Court justices and voted for them. He, again, supported a lot of different things that a lot of Democrats and other neocons and the Republicans wanted him to do, and again, he blindly did it. Lindsey Graham sold weapons to Al-Qaeda and facilitated the selling of those weapons and movement, and again, information sharing with Al-Qaeda. Again, Al-Qaeda was a CIA creation. The United States government created them. So, not a good thing, clearly. At the exact same time, he then, of course, moved his interests over to Ukraine, along with John McCain and Senator Klobuchar and all of the other ambassadors that were working with the United States and the Ukrainian government to, again, create a potential fake war with Russia. That was the entire point. Then again, you bring around the election of 2016. If Hillary Clinton had won, Lindsey Graham would have done anything and everything that Hillary Clinton wanted done, because Lindsey Graham was also involved with Benghazi. He, again, helped facilitate the movement of those weapons to, again, Libya, Benghazi, the whole thing. And then, of course, that all happened while Barack Obama was president of the United States and Hillary Clinton was in the State Department. They were all involved in all of that. And you can't leave a living witness, which is why, again, Chris Stevens was killed. And the other three individuals were also killed there. And that was the entire point. Invade the CIA outpost and then kill whoever you have to kill, because, again, we don't want information getting back that we were moving weapons to Libyans and XYZ. This is exactly who Lindsey Graham was. He was beyond dirty. But I want to read a couple of posts here that, again, are on the cue board, because in just a couple of posts, you're told exactly who Lindsey Graham was and then who he became. There is post 1305 from April 30th of 2018. And it simply said the following: no name out. Which no name was John McCain. So no name out, and then it says now, period. And then it's a post from Lindsey Graham on his Twitter account. And then it says, we love good singers, Q. So in one post, you're told Lindsey Graham flipped on John McCain, gave up the goose, gave up all the information on John McCain. Of course, the good guys already had it anyway. And then now it was, again, Lindsey Graham's turn to play ball. Many of the Q posts, of course, have to do with the exchange that he had with Justice Kavanaugh during Justice Kavanaugh's Senate confirmation hearing back in 2018. I'll get into that in just a second, because that, again, is very important. And that line of questioning was actually historic and a bit out of place. But it was also a shot over the bow, because Lindsey Graham was told to ask those questions by the good guys. And again, it was done in a threatening manner, of course, but it was also done to threaten and scare the individuals listening to that line of questioning. Again, I'll get into that in just a minute, but there was also this post, which is kind of funny. This was post 4241 from May 14th of 2020, and it simply said, again, it was a reposting of Jason Miller's X account, but it said, Graham shoots down Trump's call for Obama testimony on Russia probe origins via Politico. And then it goes down further. And then again, Q reposted a picture of a very famous photo of a military individual holding up a glove, and it says hashtag Killary on the thumb. And then on the palm, it says, we won't forget Stevens, Woods, Doherty, and Smith. And those are the individuals who were killed in Benghazi. And then Q said at the bottom, worth remembering, think chess. Do you attack the king in the beginning or middle to end? Queen protects king. So again, he said queen protects king. This is interesting because, again, everybody calls Lindsey Graham gay, which he probably was. So you're kind of being told, again, mixed meanings for different things, but you're being told that you're watching a chess game because Lindsey Graham is controlled, but you're also being told that he's gay and that he particularly voted that way because, again, they didn't want to expose the Obama-Russia D-class all the way back then, 6 years ago, the way that it's being discussed now, because now it's being discussed. And now, of course, you have Lindsey Graham out of the way. Now, before I get into the Kavanaugh stuff and the Kavanaugh posts, because, again, it was rather historic, and I'll play the audio from the Senate confirmation hearing for Justice Kavanaugh here in just a second, but Lindsey Graham, again, just got back from Ukraine. So, was Lindsey Graham poisoned? It's possible. There's pictures of him receiving COVID shots, allegedly, so was he jabbed? Yeah, probably. Again, did he die because of the COVID shots? Yeah, I mean, probably. It's quite possible. Frankly, I could care less. But I do know this, that if he was poisoned, and if he's really dead, which I have no reason to believe that he wouldn't be, when you're dealing with Ukrainian gangsters, and you've been working with Ukrainian gangsters for a very long time, and American gangsters, which of course he has been, there's only so long that you can continue to basically kiss their ass and suck up to them and say, well, Zelensky's great and we need to give him all the weapons and all the money he needs to defend Russia because Vladimir Putin's a warmonger and a killer and a murderer and blah, 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 and Russia's the enemy, and I love Israel and I love Netanyahu and blah, blah, blah. Again, that's all Lindsey Graham has really been saying, certainly within the last, 6, 7, 8 years, if not longer than that, certainly since Zelensky's been around since 2019. But with that said, if you have nothing to offer those gangsters that you're working with, and those gangsters have been relying on you to provide information to them, and then all of a sudden you can't provide information anymore, then you basically become useless. If anybody's ever seen a gangster movie, you know what happens to the gangster who doesn't provide information anymore. They get killed. Because why leave them around? Because they just become a liability. They become unreliable. Again, I'm not saying that happened in Senator Graham's case. I'm just saying that it's a possibility, because things like that are always a possibility. Anyway, with that said, this is rather important, certainly from a historic standpoint. And it really is historic and was historic, and it proves, again, that there is an operation taking place that is going on behind the scenes, although, again, it's happening in front of people's faces if they know what to look for. And I lived through this, and many of us did. And if you were tied directly into the cue boards, as this was all happening live in real time, you were seeing exactly what was going on, which is why the media never brought it up. Because remember, the media wants you to believe them all of the time, to watch them and listen to them. Like, for example, if you turn on Fox News right now, everybody is gushing over Lindsey Graham and what a great person he was. They didn't know, or certainly would never report, that he again was in league with John McCain, Hillary Clinton, a ton of bad people on all sides of the aisle, including, again, foreign agents working against the United States, and that he actually was an enemy combatant until he flipped on John McCain and then again gave up the goods, sang like a bird, and then started to actually play ball and defend everybody again that Donald Trump wanted defended. And certainly, again, it's not just Donald Trump conducting all of this, it is the actual military themselves. It's very specifically regarding the Justice Kavanaugh hearing. He played a pivotal role in that because he was instrumental in not just the questioning of it, but also destroying the media, destroying the left, and destroying, again, the rhinos on the right who were believing the sexual assault allegations that came out of nowhere when they immediately saw that the hearing wasn't going the way that the Democrats wanted. Again, Kavanaugh's pretty straight. He's pretty straight-laced. He's a straight-up dude. There's nothing wrong with him. And he wasn't dirty, and he wasn't compromised. And they brought out this Christine Blasey Ford gal out of nowhere, which, by the way, if you get on the cue boards and you type in her name, buckle up. And I recommend sitting down while you read those posts, because in those posts, it tells you exactly who she is, where she came from, and that she was a plant. That she, again, was an MK Ultra. Her father certainly, again, helped run MK Ultra in California at the university level, which, by the way, over the 10-plus day break here, that came out in Congress that MK Ultra is not only 100% real, but probably still active to some extent. So that's no longer a secret, so no one out there who's retarded can say, well, it was a conspiracy theory and that's not real. No, MK Ultra mind control is very real. It can be subtle, and it can be very direct, where an individual, again, is sat in a chair, tied to it, and brainwashed to believe things that actually did not happen. They can be drugged, shown imagery, be told a story, and be led to believe it. Christine Blasey Ford was a liar. She was also a victim of brainwashing, certainly from a younger age. Again, her father probably experimented on her, and I believe in the Q posts it alludes to that. But either way, Senator Graham came to the defense of Justice Kavanaugh very loudly, and again ended up getting him confirmed. And the entire confirmation was even told to the individuals paying attention to the Q posts back then that this was going to be the exact number, whatever it was, 53 to something, 53-47, something along those lines, of the exact senators who were going to vote in favor of his confirmation. We were told before the hearing even started what the result was going to be. And then it ended up happening exactly that way. That's an operation. That's a military operation. And this, again, is how you control the right people in the right positions. And Lindsey Graham was controlled by the good guys at this point. So before I play the audio here, which, again, the opening questioning of Justice Kavanaugh by Lindsey Graham lasted, again, it was 7 years ago, but it lasted approximately 20 minutes. Anybody can look this up. It was day 3 of the Supreme Court hearings where he gets into this line of questioning, and it was specifically on the whole 20 minutes anyway, is actually on Lindsey Graham's YouTube channel. But again, lots of Q posts were pointing people directly to this line of questioning and saying, do you think this is a coincidence that Lindsey Graham is asking Justice Kavanaugh about a very specific Supreme Court case, which has to do with enemy combatants in a foreign country still being tried by America, that the American government can still try them, in particular if they're operating in a foreign country, against the United States and the interests of the United States. Specifically, the case that he brings up is Johnson versus Eisentrager, which was in 1950. And it again specifically had to do with German soldiers after World War II going over to Japan to communicate with the Japanese about, again, U.S. interests and, again, what the United States was doing, and even, again, showing up in China and basically communicating with the Chinese about what the United States was doing. So either way, those individuals, again, were arrested by the United States military, and then they were tried, and then they were imprisoned. Some may have been executed, I'm not entirely sure, but again, he was the U.S. Secretary of Defense was Johnson, and then Lothar Eisentrager, along with others, also known as Ludwig Earnhardt, again, were associated with 20 German nationals. So that's kind of the history of the particular case. But again, it has to do with whether or not you can try individuals in a foreign country through military tribunal in the United States while they are in, a foreign country working against the interests of the United States. Okay. With that said, there's Q post this, I believe is 192 on September 5th of 2018. And it has, again, a 26-minute mark, timestamp rather, of the particular audio that you're about to listen to here. And it simply said, I'm sorry, the Q post, I got it wrong. It's 2093 is the Q post. Anyway, it says, interesting line of questions. Normal, military law versus criminal law. Think executive order. Think Hillary Rodham Clinton panic. Do you believe in coincidences? You have more than you know. This again was more heads up that the line of questioning is not accidental. Lindsey Graham is now compromised by the good guys. He's still going to go out there and say stupid shit because that's what he does. You know, I love Israel, I love Zelensky, blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to particular votes, and it comes to, again, him sitting on particular judicial committees, certainly the Senate Judiciary Committee, which is arguably the most important, he's going to play ball because he's told to play ball. And this is what you can do with the blackmailed. So again, give this line of questioning a listen in 3, 2, 1.
That we've been at war, and it's called the war on terrorism. Do you generally agree with that concept?
I do, Senator, because Congress passed the authorization for use of military force, which is still in effect. And that was passed, of course, on September 14th, 2001, 3 days later.
Let's talk about the law in war. Is there a body of law called the law of armed conflict?
There is such a body, Senator.
Is there a body of law that's called basic criminal law?
Yes, Senator.
Are there differences between those two bodies of law?
Yes, Senator.
From an American citizen's point of view, do your constitutional rights follow you? If you're in Paris, does the Fourth Amendment protect you as an American from your own government?
From your own government, yes.
Okay. So if you're in Afghanistan, do your constitutional rights protect you against your own government?
If you're an American in Afghanistan, you have constitutional rights as against the U.S. government.
Is there a long-standing...
That's wrong settled law.
Isn't there also a long-settled law that goes back to the Eisentrager case? I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, Johnson versus Eisentrager.
Right. That American citizens who collaborate with the enemy have considered enemy combatants.
They can be. They can be. They're sometimes criminally prosecuted, sometimes treated in the military.
Well, let's talk about can be. I think
under Supreme Court precedent.
Right. There's a Supreme Court decision that said that American citizens who collaborated with Nazi saboteurs were tried by the military. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I think a couple of them were executed.
Yeah.
So if anybody doubts, there's a long-standing history in this country that your constitutional rights follow you wherever you go, but you don't have a constitutional right to turn on your own government and collaborate with the enemy of the nation. You'll be treated differently. What's the name of the case, if you can recall, that reaffirmed the concept that you could hold one of our own as an enemy combatant if they were engaged in terrorist activities in Afghanistan? Are you familiar with that case?
Yeah, Hamdi.
Okay. So the bottom line is, I want every American citizen to know you have constitutional rights, but you do not have a constitutional right to collaborate with the enemy. There's a body of law well developed long before 9/11 that understood the difference between basic criminal law and the law of armed conflict. Do you understand those differences?
I do understand that there are different bodies of law, of course, Senator.
Again, the reasoning for the line of questioning there was because that's basically what Lindsey Graham was guilty of. And he was told that. He had to have been told that before, again, he turned on John McCain. Because that's what John McCain was guilty of. That's what copious amounts of senators and representatives are guilty of. But it was just a reminder. It was being done, again, not just to threaten Hillary Clinton or anybody else, John Kerry. I mean, you could pick a person. It's practically all of them. But the point is that before 9/11 and before the declaration of war, which we still sit under, there's long-standing law that again says you cannot work against the interests of the United States of America in a foreign country, and that you can be tried in a military tribunal as such. Perfect. Again, the line of questioning was historic because it was designed to scare the shit out of people. And it did, and it worked. Because after that line of questioning is when the senators created the Christine Blasey Ford story as a distraction. The Americans will be so stupid that they'll believe that this random person that we plucked out of nowhere was sexually assaulted by Kavanaugh when he was, a teenager or something. And him being on the Supreme Court, of course, is the exact opposite of what they wanted. Now, by and large, it's worked out for the good guys. I mean, he's made more good decisions than bad ones. I think that goes without saying. But even so, anybody can be threatened in copious amounts of positions. Anybody can be compromised. But you would think, again, that if you have good people in good positions, again, like a Kavanaugh, for example, and somebody came to him and threatened him, then he would go to the good guys and say, I've just been threatened, and here's who's threatened me, and XYZ. So either way, from a historic standpoint, Lindsey Graham was a traitor for a very long time. Again, where was he on the COVID issue? I don't recall him on television saying, wait a minute, everybody needs to slow down and relax. Don't take these shots. It seems highly suspect, whatever else. He wasn't doing that. He was doing the same thing that every other NPC person was doing, taking a picture of himself wearing a mask, getting injected, allegedly. Again, I'll put I have a picture of that, but I'll put it in the next war video for Monday night. But yeah, I mean, that right there, he was dead quiet because they were all dead quiet. And even when Ron Johnson started to hold his hearings, he again remained dead quiet, which is too bad because, again, he's compromised and was compromised. So, yeah, I mean, good riddance. If he's really gone, good riddance. Same thing with Mitch McConnell. They're trying to, again, assume that Mitch McConnell is still alive. In one of the previous war videos, I played a video of a nurse, and she was describing what it's like being in the ICU for ICU patients. For every day that you're in the ICU, I'm paraphrasing her, but she basically said, that's 3 days in a rest home that you have to stay within a rest home. You don't go from the ICU and then just go straight home. You're in an ICU and then you go to a rest facility, certainly when you're as old and frail as a Mitch McConnell is. And then all of a sudden, again, you have to stay certainly in that rest home and in a particular wing of a rest home until those days again are added up, or at the very least your health improves. But in his case, that's never going to happen. So he's either really dead or he's already in a rest home where he's being monitored, where basically, again, he's being, barely kept alive with strings and duct tape. I mean, I have no idea, but either way, the math doesn't add up. And she openly said, look, he's not going to go back to work. When you're in the ICU that long and then you go to a rest home, you don't go from the ICU back to work immediately. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. There's either physical therapy or there's, again, monitoring around the clock, whatever it is. But yeah, Mitch McConnell's gone too. And the walls are closing in here. I don't think that all of this is necessarily accidental. Again, was Lindsey Graham himself executed? I don't know. It's possible. I don't think it's likely at this point. But again, they're already talking about a fill-in, and that whoever the fill-in is going to be, whether it be, I heard one name, Joe Wilson or something like that, somebody from South Carolina, that this individual, again, would vote in league with Donald Trump. Certainly when it comes to the Save America Act, which ironically enough was just brought up the other day by Senator Lee. Senator Mike Lee brought it up and basically said, we need to put the Save America Act up for vote, and certainly within the month of August, or else it's not going to be voted on again before the midterms. So there are wheels in motion here that are rather important, and again, if an operation continues to take place, which it certainly seems to be the case, nothing is accidental. And things are moving at a particular pace for a very specified reason, because it has to be that way because it's military. Okay, now moving away from some of that, but again, it's just a little more geopolitics here. There were a lot of things, of course, that took place over the brief hiatus here. John Bolton, of course, has been found guilty. He could do 10 years in prison. That's absolutely fantastic. And again, in typical fashion, he accused Donald Trump of the very thing that he himself was doing, because this is exactly what a sociopath does. This is what a narcissist does. And this is what a blackmailed criminal does, is they just accuse all of their opponents of the very thing that they themselves are guilty of. So good riddance to John Bolton, again, in possession of copious amounts of classified documentation, sharing it with God knows who. And there you go. And again, he was blackmailed also, because he had to be. The individuals who aren't blackmailed, these are usually the people who are dead quiet. I'm not saying that all of the people who are quiet, who again, aren't going on the Sunday shows and all of the talk shows, and you repeatedly see them on television or hear their voices on the radio. It's not that those people aren't bad people, the ones that you don't see and the ones that you don't hear of. But the ones that you consistently see on TV and the ones that you consistently hear of who are hurling accusations, these people are blackmailed, because they are told to go on TV, go on the radio, and say what they're saying about somebody that they don't like. That happens all of the time, and that's, I think, one of the dead tells that those individuals, again, are guilty of the very things that they themselves are accusing other people of doing. Now, let me mention this, and again, this has to do with the Supreme Court ruling having to do with birthright citizenship. Again, I'm glad the Haitians are going home in Springfield, Ohio, and of course, the temporary protective order and all that nonsense is over with. Round them up and get rid of them. And anybody going, well, we need to take care of the Haitians and we need to take care of them. If people had, I heard Dave Chappelle bring it up the other day, and I thought, what a moron. I mean, politically, he's a complete idiot. He just looks at everything one-dimensionally and has no idea that actual illegal behavior is taking place. Not to mention that the entire idea of Haitians coming here is to turn whatever environment they live in into Haiti, which we can't have that. And I think that should go without saying. But either way, now that the protected status is over with, and Mike DeWine's panicking, which is great and always entertains me, again, round these people up and get rid of them. But regarding the birthright citizenship vote in the Supreme Court, I want to read this particular post from Observing Consciousness over on X, because they do a nice job of summarizing this. And basically what they say is they say, look, the Supreme Court doesn't make law. That's the job of the legislative branch, and the legislative branch can rewrite the law anytime they want, and the Senate can approve it, and of course the President of the United States can sign off on it, and then birthright citizenship just goes away. It can be done that way. Yes, you have to have the right people in the right positions. Yes, those people have to not be compromised, or you get to them, and then you make sure that their blackmailers are silenced, and that individual, again, is shown their blackmail by the good guys, and then they vote accordingly. This can happen. This is one of the things, again, that needs to occur, and I think has been occurring for quite some time. So here's what the Post says. And again, this was right after the ruling. They said, quote, "Quadruple boom. This is absolutely huge. Follow me in this. It's worth it. This is a Supreme Court exposure operation as much as it is a senatorial pressure campaign. The official ruling was 6-3 against Trump's executive order, yet the constitutional wall beneath it stands only 5-4. That distinction is the decode. Roberts, Barrett, and the 3 liberal justices ruled that the 14th Amendment guarantees citizenship to children born here, even when their parents are unlawfully or temporarily present. Kavanaugh supplied the 6th vote to stop the order while rejecting the majority's constitutional reasoning. In his view, the order does not violate the 14th Amendment. It fails because it conflicts with the federal citizenship statute enacted by Congress. 4 justices are now publicly on record that the Constitution leaves Congress room to restrict birthright citizenship. Kavanaugh then moved the pressure upstream by making clear that Congress can amend 8 U.S.C. subsection 1401A, create exceptions for children born to foreign citizens unlawfully or temporarily inside the country, and force the question back before the court. Trump forced the issue through the executive branch. The court exposed its internal fault line. Kavanaugh identified the statutory barrier and placed the legislative key in the hands of the Senate. The order was blocked because Congress left the law untouched. Now every senator owns that decision. Thomas followed with a 91-page constitutional foundation tracing citizenship through allegiance, jurisdiction, domicile, and Civil Rights Act of 1866, the 14th Amendment debates, and the limits of Wong-Kim arc. He was building the record for the next case while warning that this ruling may not stand the test of time because it devalues American citizenship. Alito translated the doctrine into national security reality. A mother enters long enough to give birth, returns to a strategic adversary, raises the child outside America, and teaches the child to hate the United States. Yet under the majority's ruling, that person remains an American citizen with the passport, entry rights, and political privileges attached to that status. Thomas built the record, Alito exposed the consequence, and Kavanaugh revealed the congressional mechanism. Roberts and Barrett supplied the decisive votes, preserving the barrier. Now follow the latter. Citizenship establishes membership. Membership opens voter registration. Registration creates ballot access. Ballots determine representation. Representation controls Congress, and Congress writes the laws governing citizenship and elections. That's why birthright citizenship legislation and the Save America Act are separate rails inside the same sovereignty system. One determines who enters the political body, the other verifies citizenship before political power is exercised. Birthright legislation defines membership, while the Save America Act protects the franchise through documentary proof of citizenship, voter identification, voter roll controls, and election safeguards. SCOTUS has exposed both ends of the political power chain: who becomes a citizen and how ballots are accepted and counted. Senators can no longer hide behind the court, presidential authority, or claim that Congress lacks power. The ruling exposed the fracture. Kavanaugh explained why executive action was insufficient, and the 6th vote identified Congress as the institution capable of changing the law. The ruling did not close the issue, it exposed the entire ladder. A 6-3 loss became a 5-4 constitutional fracture, a 4-justice roadmap, a 91-page foundation, a national security warning, and a direct legislative handoff to senators who must now place their names beside action, or surrender. The order was blocked, the architecture was revealed, the pressure moved upstream. It says the Senate owns the outcome. Watch the video and read below. And again, they have a quick little video from Fox News and then an AI-generated image that basically summarizes what I just read there. So again, that's the point. The point is that the Supreme Court can expose how bad a law is, which is what happened. And then at the same time, they can remind Congress that it's Congress's job to make the law, that they can just change it if they want to. And again, immediately afterwards, it was whatever it was, a few days later, Donald Trump was like, don't worry, we're bringing this back to the court eventually. they're going to take this up again and we're going to make them take this up again. Well, they can certainly take it up again when they pass a law. And then the Supreme Court can be like, well, yep, you passed a law, so it's law, so that's that. And then that's the end of it. We can also see why this is so important. This is so immensely important because we have Somalis, Muslims, you name it, darks from all over the world coming here, running for office illegally. I mean, Ilhan Omar is still in Congress and she's an illegal alien. That's against the law. But again, she's still here, and the only reason I think that she's still sitting in Congress isn't because she's innocent. It's because she's going to be used at the right time as an example. And when that happens and she's deported, again, it's not something I foresaw and I got this wrong and I openly admitted it. I think you're going to see in that particular case, when that happens and when that trigger gets pulled and that card gets played, you're going to see a lot of people self-deport. A lot of these Somalis are going to turn and run and go home because they're going to recognize that they're not citizens and that running for office is going to be a bad idea. But this is also what they want. They want to come here. They want to reproduce. They want to run for office. They want to take over local jurisdictions, school boards, city councils, you name it. County commissioners, state representatives, become a governor someday. Hell, become a president. Good luck with that one, but they'd try. And then again, I mean, Obama did it. Hell, he was a Muslim and not a natural-born citizen. So it certainly worked for him, and of course he had the backing of everybody and every secret society from here to Timbuktu. But either way, that's the plan. And that's also how they want to usher in Sharia law. That's why you're seeing it at the K12 level. That's why you're seeing, again, Muslims infiltrate these schools and tossing out Qurans left and right and hijabs and being like, oh, it's a fashion statement. No, it isn't. It's an invasion. That's exactly what it is. And it's constant, and it isn't going to stop. You have to crush these people from the top down. And they'll run, and they'll scurry once they start to see the ceiling cave in. This is one of those things that just has to get fixed. It has to be fixed permanently. Again, could it be reversed in the future? I suppose. I just can't imagine the American public ever wanting that. The vast majority of, again, the American public has common sense. The citizenry here has common sense. Nothing pisses off the American people more than watching individuals, again, steal, rob, cheat, lie, and then be given more, certainly by a corrupt government, to benefit them at our expense. That'll piss off any American with common sense. If somebody is given citizenship, money, food, a place to live, and they've done nothing, well, that's a problem. And again, we can't have a nation if that doesn't get solved. So I think the good guys know that. We certainly know it. And yeah, it has to happen. It just has to occur. So let me mention this too. Again, shifting gears slightly, but what would this show be if I didn't bring up Israel at least once? This too is from Observing Consciousness, and again, it just proves that Israel is being controlled. Again, they're evil, we know that, but we're also saving them for last, and their exposure has been constant, and it's not going away. They made a post here on July 6th, and they said the following: Israel is out of boogeymen. Iran has been boxed in, Hezbollah has been tied into a deal, Hamas is being stripped out of the visible governing layer in Gaza. The old fear ladder is collapsing in sequence. That is why Netanyahu is reaching for Turkey. Which, by the way, which is exactly why that huge meeting took place in Turkey. Because Erdogan, the president of Turkey, is not the bad guy. He knows what Israel wants. He knows what Israel had planned for the entire Middle East, and he doesn't like it. Again, if Turkey was a part of the greater Israel project, I'd say good luck to Israel, because that's not going to happen. And again, Turkey's not going to willfully give up their land, neither is Saudi Arabia, neither are any of these other countries. Everybody knows over there that Israel's the bad guy, because they've always been. It goes on here, it says, Greece becomes the cover ally, Cyprus becomes the legal hook, NATO becomes the pressure venue, and F-35s become the trigger. Israeli air superiority remains the protected asset underneath the whole move. Why? This is the same war script scrambling for a new monster. The deeper signal is larger than Israel alone. The CCP and City of London just lost their Middle East outpost. For decades, Israel functioned as the forward operating node for permanent emergency financial leverage, intelligence pressure, regional destabilization, and controlled access into the heart of the Middle East. That architecture is being dismantled. Iran is being moved into deal structure. Hezbollah is being moved into disarmament structure. Hamas is being moved out of the governance structure, and Israel's political class is being moved out from behind the boogeyman shield. So Turkey gets auditioned as the next existential threat because the old system needs another enemy before accountability reaches the room. That is the whole pattern. Once the boogeyman architecture is gone, the outpost is exposed, and once the outpost is exposed, the empire behind it has nowhere left to hide. Exactly. Every single time that a particular country is communicating with the United States in a positive way for peace, what does Israel do? They panic. And they go, our bad guy exists in this country now. And then we go to that country, like Donald Trump just did, shake hands with Aragon and go, yeah, we've been allies for a long time. I like this guy. He likes me. We get along. Everything's cool. He's been to the White House recently. I'm over here. We're shaking hands. Again, the giant, what do you call it? The procession, I guess. The pomp and circumstance that they rolled out for Donald Trump just this last time, just recently in Turkey, was way different than what they rolled out for the UN members. I'm sorry, not UN, NATO. They sent this van to pick up the NATO people at the airport when they had Donald Trump cruising around in a giant limousine. One of those, again, bulletproof limousines with horses and the whole thing. Horses, flags, the entire thing, as he was rolling into Turkey. Not the case with the NATO people. So again, who's really in charge over there? It's not NATO. The Middle Eastern countries over there know that NATO is the problem. And again, Donald Trump has no problem calling out NATO to NATO's face. And he did it the entire time he was over there. He openly looked at Scott Bessent, his Treasury Secretary, and he said, cut off all trade to Spain. I don't like what Spain's doing. They're letting their entire country be infiltrated by Africans and Middle Easterners. That has to stop. Cut off all trade with Spain. It's brilliant, and it works. That kind of stuff works. That kind of pressure, that leverage, and that leadership works because that's the way that things are supposed to get done. Things get done quickly that way. Again, Spain's lost. It's turning into the UK. It's probably worse than the UK. If you've ever seen the footage of these blacks, again, showing up in motorboats on the coast of Spain, these beautiful beaches, and then they all hop out of the boat and they just run on shore. There's not a single Spaniard stopping any of them. Not one. I mean, do they have guns over there? You'd think they'd just start cutting them down, but again, apparently they don't. They're like, well, this is a regular occurrence here. It's just the way that it goes. I mean, it's frightening. But again, this is what they vote for. This is apparently just the blind brainwashing that they just engage in on a constant basis. But of course, it's not all of them. There are plenty of Spaniards over there who know exactly what's going on, and they can't stand it either. I'm not sure the Spaniards are going to be able to vote their way out of their own problems. Again, like a lot of European countries, the UK is completely lost. But who knows? Who knows what lies ahead? Could be an American invasion cleans up the entire thing. A liberation, we could call it. Basically what happened in Europe back in the 1930s. Again, that was a liberation. The German army went through Europe and liberated those communist countries because they were becoming very, very communistic. They left it to the people. They said, fix your own government. We don't want to stay here forever. We'd like to go back to Germany and mind our own business. And then, of course, everybody just interpreted that as being a giant invasion and, well, it's war, and look what the Nazi war machine, quote unquote, is doing. No, they were liberating countries. I suggest we do the same in the future. Why not? We've done it to Venezuela. We've done it to Iran. We've done it with lots of countries over the years. And again, we don't even have to necessarily start a war. There are other things that can be done to liberate countries. You can work within. Again, you can work with a certain number of people. You can get certain people in particular positions. It takes time, but eventually the right thing can happen. So, yeah, I'm trying to stay optimistic about some of this, but it's a complicated process, and as we all know, it takes a great deal of time. It's not something that can be done overnight, although that would be nice if it could. Okay, let me see here. I could keep going. Lots of geopolitical stuff. Doge is officially over, although that was a promise that a year and a half ago Doge started up and then exposed copious amounts of fraud, and we were told that a year and a half from its startup that it would be eliminated, essentially, because that's all it would take for them to, of course, gather all the necessary information and certainly the blackmail that they have on copious amounts of people. Of course, USAID being one of the major takedowns, along with endless others. But again, if I was a betting person, I'd say that Doge was just the front, that we already had the goods from the military and from surveillance and tracking the money and the money laundering and the illegality and everything. Of course, human trafficking was involved in it, and XYZ, all these other NGOs and organizations, and all the people involved too who are running it. But I think the military was behind it. Doge was the front man, much like Nick Shirley's the front man. He's not really the guy exposing a lot of the fraud. He's just the dude with a microphone going around with a camera knocking on a door. But it's other individuals, again, feeding him copious amounts of information. And again, the same happened with Doge. So that was a good thing. One cultural thing here before I move on to education, of which there's a great deal of just horrific education stories here to bring up. But the World Cup. I've watched a few games. Again, it's been entertaining, I guess. I haven't watched soccer since, I want to say, 2019. It's been a while. Feels like it's been a while anyway. But the politics still, again, always finds a way to inject itself into these games. Bad calls, corrupt calls. Of course, there was the fake red card, which was not really a red card that ended up getting reversed because Donald Trump complained about it, and rightfully so. I think, again, he was highlighting, in that particular motion there, he was highlighting some of the fraud, of course, that exists with a lot of these games. You try to take out one of the better strikers for the United States on a call that shouldn't have been a red call a red card rather in the first place. But there was this, which I, again, find completely disgusting. And it had to do with Cape Verde. And a lot of people, again, not me, but a lot of people were like, oh, Cape Verde, they're winning soccer games and what a Cinderella story and blah, blah, blah. Well, of course, they've been eliminated and they lost. But their team captain was accused of raping their translator before they started playing. I mean, what? Sports ball is more important than rape, apparently. And all the announcers, of course, didn't bring it up in the slightest. It was just, oh, thank you, Cape Verde. I watched the end of one of their games, of course, where they ended up losing and getting knocked out. And the announcers were just drooling over them. And I'm saying, why? Why? They're not that good. They scored a couple of goals, good for them. They beat a few teams, fine. But their team captain raped a woman. Again, this is from the New York Post. It says Ryan Mendez, 36, who has played in all three of the African islands countries' World Cup games so far, was accused of sexually assaulting a Brazilian woman hired to be the team's translator during a trip to New Zealand to play a game in March, reported Brazil's Globo News outlet. Again, apparently there's security footage in New Zealand from one of the hotels, allegedly, and I don't know. Reviewing the footage, and then they'll make a decision as to whether or not to charge him with anything. But again, let's let him play anyway, because, well, he's our team captain, and sports ball matters and is more important than rape. Again, it's it's insane. And speaking of insanity, let's get into education here. I wrote a couple of Substacks, or sort of reposted a few Substacks here from other news stories. And one of them, of course, was out in California, which was absolutely hilarious, having to do with a return to Ebonics at the preschool level, and allegedly using that as a bridge to teach English for, of course, black students. It's completely ridiculous, absolutely stupid. I remember the first time I heard about Ebonics, again, it was back in the 90s, early to mid 90s when it first, again, became a thing in Oakland, California. It was the butt of every joke. It was just constant jokes about it. And it still is, even to this day. And why anybody would think that it's 100% fine, again, is beyond me. Again, you talk about low IQ, that right there should prove it. But at the exact same time, there's a San Diego charter school that apparently is adopting a couple of ChatGPT AI robots to basically do a lot of the instructing at the tune of $500,000. And you talk about a waste of money, that right there is it. But again, when you have low IQ individuals running a charter school, or any school for that matter, that's the result you're going to get. So that Substack certainly exists, and you can check that out if you're interested. But I want to spend some time on this one. This has to do with Lakota local schools in Butler County, Ohio, where I live, and they are now being sued by parents, specifically two, of a child, a former student there, who again was being sexually groomed by a school employee who I believe was their special education instructor. Let's see, I want to say around the age of 13 for at least 3 years. And apparently district officials knew about it, or individuals again within the district knew about it. And instead of firing them, they basically allowed the HR director at the time to meet with the teacher once the teacher got caught. The teacher was not placed on administrative leave like they should have been. They weren't investigated the way that they should have been. They were allowed to take some kind of medical leave, and then again were able to retire. Again, I don't know all the ins and outs as to whether or not they were arrested, although I've invited former board member Darby Bodie to be on the show if she's interested, if she listens to this, and she follows me on Rumble and on X. Again, you're welcome to show up and describe the entire story. I'll give you the floor, and this is an interesting one to say the least. Not to mention the timing of the lawsuit in response to what previously has occurred, which is beyond horrific, and that should go without saying. But the superintendent immediately puts out a video basically saying that there's a strategic plan in place now for the district, and we have a strategic plan, and we're going to describe this in the next board meeting, which has already happened, and we care about the safety and security of all students, and you can trust me, and I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. Her name is Ashley Whiteley. And I'm just going to say this just kind of regarding her in brief. She is exactly why you do not hire female former elementary school employees to be a superintendent of a school district. If you listen to this woman talk, and again, you can find her online, this is why you don't do that. Again, she's a do-gooder. She's a policy follower. She thinks that what she's doing is the right thing. It typically isn't. And it's just emblematic of, again, many people who take over such positions. Same exact thing happens to be the case in the Talawanda School District in the town where I live. Again, the superintendent is a former elementary school teacher, and he happens to be gay. This is a problem. Again, individuals who teach elementary school, no offense, they typically, and it's not all of them, but they typically wouldn't be able to cut it at the middle school or high school level. Certainly not as an administrator, and certainly not as a superintendent. Brushing things under the rug, plugging their ears, covering their eyes, this is exactly what they tend to do when it comes to very serious corruption cases. And Lakota is a massive school district in the state of Ohio, and they are incredibly dirty and incredibly corrupt. But Darby Bodie over on X, again, I wrote an entire Substack about the actual lawsuit itself. I wish I had my hands on the actual lawsuit. It costs like $50 to download off the internet. I'm not that interested in it to pay $50 for it. But I do want to play this again, brief little news outlet, local news outlet audio regarding this, because again, it kind of summarizes the entire thing. But the specifics are disgusting and horrific, and Darby Bodie has posted some of these specifics on her X page, which I'm going to read momentarily, but give this Channel 5 WLWT news outlet audio a listen in 3, 2, 1.
You on WLWT and back here at home, the parents of a Lakota high schooler are now suing the district, claiming that it didn't do enough to stop reported abuse on their child. They say that their child was groomed and sexually abused by a former teacher.
And the parents say the abuse happened over the course of 3 years on school property. WLWT News 5 anchor Chris Jacobs has been digging through the documents. Chris, what have you learned?
And this is pointed at a couple of different directions here. The lawsuit names a former teacher, the superintendent, and Lakota principal. The parents say their child had, quote, known and pre-existing vulnerabilities. The lawsuit says the abuse happened on district property, district licensed devices, applications, and online accounts. Now, the parents claim the district did not monitor its own networks and ignored repeated signs of abuse. The parents also go on to say the teacher groomed the child for 3 years, then sexually abused her, and when the school found out, they didn't put him on leave, but allowed him to retire. The lawsuit alleges the district failed to report the teacher to the Ohio Department of Education after the abuse was reported in April of last year. They say he was able to pick up the victim from a school activity and engage in inappropriate contact in his car. Now, the Lakota local school district sent us a statement denying the allegations, saying the safety of students is their first priority. They also say when they learned about the allegations from the Butler County Sheriff's Office, the individual was placed on leave and an internal investigation was opened, but the teacher submitted their retirement resignation before that investigation was finished. Lakota says because this is an active lawsuit, they are limited in what they can say, but they do look forward to addressing the inaccuracies.
Darby Bodie over on X, again, former board member, they basically targeted her because she was exposing a lot of this corruption. Let's see. She said the following here on July 11th. She said, based on the civil complaint, the accusations and behaviors of Ronald Henrich, however you pronounce it, against the minor plaintiff include a systematic pattern of grooming, manipulation, and sexual abuse over 3 years. Grooming and relationship development. It says unauthorized access. Henrich allowed Jill to attend his gifted program, study hall, instead of her assigned one in 7th grade, despite her not being a designated gifted student. It says targeting vulnerabilities. He built a relationship with Jill by showing her special attention, quote unquote, and exploiting her personal struggles, including her history of anxiety, self-harm, and past sexual abuse, which she shared with him. Again, these are the kinds of people that are groomed within these environments. And this happens in every school district all across the nation on a day in and day out basis. It goes on. It says mentoring pretense. He repeatedly pulled Jill out of her regular classes for one-on-one mentoring sessions, claiming that it was necessary for her anxiety and mental health. Yes, grooming. App-based communication then. It says he messaged Jill frequently on the district's Remind app, often outside of school hours, with messages that became increasingly personal, such as saying good morning and good night, and discussing their dinners. Switching platforms, it says, when the district ended its contact with the Remind app, Henrich continued his daily personal communications through Jill's district email and Google Docs account. Then it says boundary violations and stalking. Secluded lunches. During Jill's 9th grade year, Henrich, who was no longer assigned to her building, visited her every Friday to eat lunch alone with her in a mindfulness room, quote unquote, with the door closed, often bringing her food from outside the school. My God. Again, did no one saw this? Nobody saw this. It's impossible. It goes on, it says inappropriate physical presence. He stalked Jill by visiting her after band practice in a building where he had no official responsibilities. Again, if school employees, board members, or anybody are in buildings consistently, then they are preying on somebody within that environment. Because again, if they have no business in the building, and even if they think they do and they are there consistently, they are there preying on people. Whether it's just to be around people because they get off on that, or again, they're there as a power move. Either way, they shouldn't be there. And people, again, should report this. It says circumventing parents. He reached out directly to Jill's therapist without her mother's consent to discuss developments in Jill's mental health. That's not good either. Orchestrated meetings. He arranged to meet Jill at a local driving range outside of school hours and feigned that their encounter was a coincidence to her family. It then says inappropriate conversations with mother. He expressed to Jill's mother that he had lost sleep and weight over their relationship and mentioned he missed how things used to be, quote unquote, when teachers could drive students alone in their vehicles. This guy is perverted to say the least. Sexual abuse and graphic misconduct, Canva incident on March 20th of 2025. Jill's mother discovered Henrich was actively typing and immediately deleting extremely sexually graphic messages on a live Canva document shared with Jill. Now, in another post, I should say this, Darby Bodie posted the following, and this is probably one of those conversations. It says, the following is a portion, this is directly from the lawsuit, I believe. The following is a portion of the graphic messages typed by defendant Henrich, which were recorded by the parents. He said the following, quote, then I push it back out again, tugging on your erect nipple. It's at this point you start to moan in pain, but also some pleasure. It's time for punishment. Number 3. It says, I get behind you standing, you kneeling, I tap your ass. Now a bit harder on the right side, it's getting redder and redder. I'm going to stop there, but you get the gist. And if you're curious as to whether or not he's in jail, he's not. So there's that. Apparently insufficient evidence as far as the Butler County Sheriff's Department was concerned. And yeah. Anyway, Bodie's post goes on here. They said graphic content, of course, these recorded messages included detailed descriptions of Henrich engaging in rough sexual foreplay and penetrative acts with Jill, which he referred to as punishment, quote unquote. Then physical abuse, the messages depicted Henrich causing Jill pain, pulling her hair, and smacking her. And then post-discovery misconduct, unauthorized contact in December of 2025 after the abuse had been substantiated by Butler County Children's Services. Henrich communicated with Jill during the school day via another student's phone. Physical encounter a few days later, Henrich picked Jill up from a mandatory school band practice and drove her to a park where they laid together, quote unquote, in his vehicle before he returned her to school. Again, wood chipper. This is where these people belong. Here's another post that was sent my way. This is from Preble County, just north of me. This is Kristen Schammel, 45 years old, a former Eaton middle school teacher, has been arrested in Florida after being indicted on 10 counts of sexual battery. According to the Preble County Sheriff's Office, the investigation into 45-year-old Kristen Schammel began earlier this year after a former student came forward with allegations of inappropriate sexual conduct that allegedly occurred while the student attended Eaton Middle School. Quote, the victim came to us and made an allegation of inappropriate sexual activity while they were a student at the middle school, Preble County Sheriff Mike Simpson said. A Preble County grand jury returned an indictment against Schammel on Monday. She was later taken into custody in the St. Petersburg, Florida area and is currently awaiting extradition back to Ohio, where she will face charges. This is not the first teacher staff member that has been employed at Eaton schools from what I am seeing within the last year. This would make 3 that have been charged with CSA charges, unquote. Yeah, that's called a pattern. And again, who's the administrator? Who's not watching these people? See, this is the job of a school principal. But of course, if the school principal is sexually assaulting minors, then that's a problem. But the adults in the building are supposed to be watching one another. You're not supposed to be a family. You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to be constantly working together for the betterment of children. I mean, all of those phrases get said, which, yes, you're all supposed to be doing that. However, that's not what goes on in these buildings. You're supposed to be watching one another. You're supposed to be observing one another, paying attention to weird behavior. This is also the job of a school employee, regardless of your position. You're supposed to record this behavior and then immediately report it once you see it. You're actually supposed to report it even if you suspect it, which is why this next story is interesting, because this next story again comes from the federal government and the Department of Education cracking down on schools that aren't investigating properly allegations of sexual abuse. The story specifically says that Trump launches a national crackdown on teachers accused of sexual abuse. California could lose $50 million. Basically, long story short, if they pass the trash or they don't do proper investigations among individuals who, again, are accused, that's the key word there, is accused. Which, again, you would think that this would open up a huge can of worms for every school district, because lots of school districts have accused employees that, again, are allowed to remain. Like the one in the town where I live. Same thing. But that, again, ultimately, if they don't do what they're supposed to do, then they can lose federal funding. Theoretically, you'd have to do this across the entire board. With everybody, with every school district. Again, it's just too common. These sexual crimes that exist within American K12 schools are too common. Which leads me to this, and then I'm going to wrap up the education portion here, but this was written on American Thinker on my birthday, July 8th, and it says the following, and again, I think it's beyond appropriate, because this is the profession, and the profession does not need compliments. People should not be complimenting this profession. Again, people with a conscience should be leaving this profession as they currently are, and that should increase. But it was titled, "Stop Praising All Our Wonderful Quote-Unquote Teachers." Subtitle says, "There are obviously many excellent teachers, but as a whole, educators are one of the nation's least admirable professional cohorts and contain numerous individuals who shouldn't be near children at all." They said, quote, and this was written by, let me get the author's name here, Richard Kirk. They said the following: "As a teacher for over 2 decades, I'm allowed to criticize people who regularly extol all the wonderful teachers in our country. In any cohort numbering over 5 million, there are obviously many excellent teachers, but as a whole, educators are one of the nation's least admirable professional cohorts and contain numerous individuals who shouldn't be near children at all. Thomas Sowell has long noted that education majors represent the dregs of college and postgraduate applicants. One study found that only 7% of high school seniors with SAT scores in the top quintile choose education as a major, whereas more than half of those in the lowest quintile went into education. What's true of students is also true about their instructors and the quality of classes taught by these doctors, quote-unquote, who rank at the bottom of the academic totem pole in terms of collegial respect. Little wonder that Jill Biden's doctorate degree, quote-unquote, in EDD, was in education. Her so-called dissertation was accurately described in a 2020 Wall Street Journal opinion column as emitting so much noxious methane, the EPA should regulate it, quote-unquote. Given the paucity of significant content compared to disciplines like history or science, there is always the temptation, as Sowell again notes, to promote educational fads. Some years ago, for example, the look-say method of reading replaced a long-proven technique, phonics, doubtless to create some new and improved product. As if depriving generations of children the ability to read effectively weren't bad enough, schools of education, along with their 10-to-1 leftist scholastic mentors, who employ curricula designed to indoctrinate kids in perverse ideologies that have proliferated for decades at universities where former terrorists like Distinguished Professor of Education Bill Ayers and Northwestern Law's Bernadine Dorn found cushy employment. I offer as one example of egregious educational malpractice this video of the Las Vegas English quote-unquote teacher who actively imposes his everybody should be a little gay philosophy on middle school students while hiding preferred pronoun interactions from parents. This educator even involves his students in choosing the color of his makeup and eyeshadow. Unsurprisingly, critical race theory also finds its way into English class as well as lessons about police brutality and racism via a book called Hush. In this literary classic, two white cops kill a black teenager, leading to the inevitable, anti-cop white racism conclusion. Needless to say, this shaper of young minds isn't at all shy about confronting black students with MAGA sympathies or helping other students come out, quote-unquote, as gay. The very fact that someone like that was hired to teach at Gunderson Middle School says something unflattering about school administrators. As of this writing, the school principal only confirms that a massive investigation is underway, not that the teacher pushing a totally unethical sexual and political agenda on captive kids has been fired. At least in the Vegas case, what the teacher did was a violation of the school's policy vis-a-vis parents. In California, the benighted legislature actually passed a law in 2024, AB 1955, forbidding school districts from requiring parental notification about gender identification. That law was tossed 6-3 by the Supreme Court earlier this year. But in the words of Grok, quote, as of June 2026, California public schools operate in a state of legal tension and partial limbo on parental notification for students' gender identity or pronoun usage, unquote. That statement means teachers can't be required to withhold information, but are likely free to do so if not directly asked by parents. The overwhelming alignment of educators with the Democrat Party and its now bizarre policies was made clear as long ago as 1980, when at least 15% of DNC presidential delegates were affiliated with education, most of them members of unions like the National Education Association or American Federation of Teachers. The latter organization's current president, Randy Weingarten, provides a visible symbol of education's decline, a shrieking harridan for whom reasoned discourse is as foreign as particle physics to a preschooler. This insidious collaboration of teacher unions and Democrat politicians has created a scenario in which favors benefiting the union, not students, are traded in exchange for contributions and votes. Finally, consider teachers leading a flock of elementary school students on a No Kings March with prepared signs that confront motorists on a busy street just a few yards away. This outrageous manipulation of kids barely able to read, much less grasp the intricacies of political issues, happened in my still marginally conservative Southern California city. I don't doubt that other teachers took liberties with their students thanks to this No Kings communication toolkit distributed to NEA members. Several years ago, I received a C-Best math test for California public school teachers that was so risibly simple I could hardly believe any qualified applicant would fail to pass it. Here was one question, quote, 7 more than 2 times a number is 35. What is the number? Slightly challenging perhaps, but if it's a multiple choice question, A42, B28, C21, D14, E5. Yet lawsuits were filed about how such tests unfairly excluded otherwise qualified minority teachers. And even now the education establishment pushes to eliminate these minimal competency tests. So please spare me encomiums about great teachers unless you're speaking about the district minority who didn't major in education, know their subject matter, aren't active union members, and don't dehumanize students through indoctrination, grooming, or using them as political props, unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, it's official that the business continues to kill itself. A business that kills itself and willfully does it thinking that they're actually making it better, or more equitable, as they would say. They clearly aren't. And one day it will cease to exist, and they will blame endless people, who are not them, as to why it doesn't exist. They are literally destroying themselves out of a job, the people who work within. And they wonder why. They wonder why they get the bad press. They wonder why they get the bad attention. It's their actions. It's who they are as people. It isn't legislative moves. It's not parents pulling their children out of the system. That's not it. The problem exists within. Always has, always will. They fall for the next thing. Whatever the next thing is that comes down the pipeline, they just implement it without question. As I've said before numerous times, when it comes to certain policies and certain games, gimmicks, and even technological tools, the education business is downstream from the corporate world, and they don't even know it. So when they receive whatever thing that is, they implement it believing that it's going to work within their environment no matter what. So much so that the environment of education, so to speak, which is not education by any stretch, it is brainwashing, it becomes again a testing ground. It becomes an MK Ultra mind control testing ground to see who will accept it. Now, I meant to mention this earlier, but it fits right in with this general conversation. Lots of people right now, of course, are commenting on the preliminary trial, quote unquote, of Tyler Robinson regarding Charlie Kirk and that fake assassination. He, of course, is not dead, and the spoon bending that is taking place with the entire thing is absolutely astounding. I mean, again, the number of educators that lost their jobs for commenting that Charlie Kirk is dead is endless. Jokes on all of them, he isn't dead. The entire thing, again, was a psychological operation. I've been over it before in depth. I'm not going to belabor the issue. I just find it funny that anybody in the courtroom and all of these talking heads, the Benny Johnsons, the Jack Posobics, all these idiots, they're all there. And they're all saying, well, I've seen this and I've seen this and I've seen this. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not a real trial. Because rarely is there a preliminary trial of this magnitude this far out. It's been a year since that fake assassination even took place. There was never a bullet. Now all of a sudden there's a bullet? What happened to the exit wound? I thought his neck was made of steel and it stopped a 30-06. Turns out, apparently it wasn't a 30-06 bullet that was used. It was something else. It was a different size. So says the person who was the medical examiner. There isn't a single story that's being told that is accurate from one person to the next regarding anything related to the Charlie Kirk psychological operation. And the one question, the one statement, the one angle that none of them have covered, and I mean none of them, not even Candace Owens, is that he isn't dead. That it was staged, that it was fake, that it was a blood bag. That's it. Again, I've been over all of the reasons as to why they would stage such a thing. I'm not going to belabor that issue again either, because as far as I'm concerned, it's irrelevant. Just understand that what you're watching regarding the debate about that fake event and the who did what and who was where when and XYZ, all of that's fake in itself. It's a show within a show. And if those individuals, again, are trying to pass this off as if my friend Charlie Kirk was killed and I remember where I was that day and it was hurtful and blah, blah, blah. And I've seen evidence and I've been in the courtroom and I know what it's like and I've communicated with this person and that person and all these other, again, just conversations and communications that they have. None of them are important, and those people are your enemy too, because there is only the truth and thinking for yourself. Now, I said this a long time ago, and it still remains true to this day. All those YouTube gun bros bringing up, again, real 30-06 bullets and the guns that shoot them, openly shooting at targets and showing people what they do to the actual targets. I played a video again on my socials and in the war video of one of these gun bros who again comments on news stories and Second Amendment related issues, I believe out of Texas or Tennessee, one of the two states, my apologies. But either way, he takes a giant piece of cow meat with a cow femur and a block of concrete behind it. He stands away 100 and whatever it was, 50 yards away, 125, 150 yards away, with the same gun, with the same bullet, and it blows apart the meat, blows apart the bone, and blows apart the concrete block behind it. 2 concrete blocks. Did that happen with Charlie Kirk? No. Why? Because he wasn't shot in the neck. And you have, again, all the people saying, well, it was the microphone he had in his neck. It was sabotage. It was a little bomb that went off, and that's what caused his neck to explode. Wrong again. Still not true. He was in on it. Charlie Kirk was in on it too. The question is, why? Was it to expose his wife, TPUSA, Israel, get ahead of what they all wanted to do to him? 1,000 things. I don't care how the trial ends up. I really don't. I just find it funny that people in the education business fell for it. But that doesn't surprise me, because they fall for everything. They'll fall for anything, and then, of course, they seek to then create policy based on whatever thing is in the news that occurs with individuals or whatever people are talking about, or again, whatever the flavor of the month is. It's amazing. So, yeah, it's disappointing because, again, the truth is the best propaganda, as I've said a million times. But lying, I'm telling you, the number of lies that people just have to remember and then continuously repeat, and then the next thing that they say is built on that lie, that's never going to have a good ending. It's never going to work out for a nation, let alone a people. Case in point, jab-related stories. There are many, but in the interest of brevity, I'm just going to make this quick. This was from Zero Hedge a couple Tuesdays ago. RFK Jr. announces he's ending emergency liability protection for COVID-19 vaccine makers. Why would that be the case? Then out of National File, you have Idaho mother charged with murder after the ER doctor diagnosed twins with post-vaccine reaction. It says the following here: an Idaho mother now faces 2 counts of first-degree murder, and the emergency room doctor who treated her dying twins documented that she already knew the children were suffering a post-vaccine reaction. Andrea Shaw, 23 years old, brought her 18-month-old fraternal twins Dallas and Tyson to a routine wellness visit on April 23, 2025. Before nurses administered the shots, Shaw and her mother-in-law warned the pediatrician that the twins' father's family had a history of adverse reactions to flu vaccines. The pediatrician dismissed the warning and proceeded. The twins received the flu, hepatitis A, and DTaP vaccines. Within hours, the toddlers became lethargic. Their lips turned blue. The next morning, Shaw rushed them to the emergency room. The treating physician, after hearing that the twins had received 3 vaccines the day before, diagnosed them with post-immunization reaction initial encounter. And they died. They remained sick for days, and on the morning of May 1st, Shaw found both children unresponsive in their shared bed. Again, this can't get any clearer. These dots are on top of each other. But unfortunately, this is the cost of lying. When people believe lies, they continue to compound their lies with more lies. They believe it, and then they act upon it. And then it always has a negative effect. Finally, there was this, and I will include this particular study in the description below because this is worth it. This is from Maxine Pai over on X. They said the following here, and they too listed the particular study from the 1960s. It says, in 1968, researchers ran the largest randomized trial ever done on saturated fat. Over 9,000 people in Minnesota state hospitals were split between animal fat and corn oil for years. The corn oil group's cholesterol dropped hard. The full result never got published. The raw data sat on magnetic tapes in a basement for over 40 years. A researcher named Christopher Ramsden tracked those tapes down in 2013 and ran the numbers the original team never released. For every 30-point drop in cholesterol, death risk rose 22%. Side note, cholesterol is good for you. You need it. It's important. And the drugs that people take to lower cholesterol are not only made from snake venom, but they reduce cholesterol, thereby reducing the lubrication of the myelin sheath around your brain and spinal cord, thereby also leading to dementia and Alzheimer's. They went on, they said the lower the cholesterol fell, the faster people died. In the over 65s, each drop of roughly half a point on the cholesterol scale carried a 35% higher death risk within 2 years. The trial is real. It was double-blind. It was the gold standard design. And it found the exact opposite of what dietary guidelines were about to be built on. It sat unpublished for over 40 years while the low-fat, high-vegetable oil advice became national policy. This was not a small study lost in the noise, it was the largest of its kind. And the finding that mattered most never reached a single doctor's desk for 4 decades. The study was titled, quote, Reevaluation of the Traditional Diet Heart Hypothesis, Analysis of Recovered Data from Minnesota Coronary Experiment 1968 through 73. And it was finally published in April of 2016. Again, I will link that in the description below if you're interested. Ladies and gentlemen, it's great as always to be back in the saddle. Welcome back to the show. If you're new to the show, welcome. And just as a little fun note, I started up another YouTube channel just as an experiment, only this time I'm running it through an RSS feed so that the podcast is uploaded to YouTube almost immediately as the podcast again goes out to all the other audio platforms. Just in doing that, within the first week of having this YouTube channel set up, because as you know, if you've been listening to the show for a couple of years, you may recall, I believe it was in 2024 in November, I uploaded the show on YouTube, and within 8 days it was flagged, 10 days it was striked, and then within the month, the entire show was kicked off of YouTube. Or, all the normal things. Medical misinformation, hate speech, blah, blah, blah. Lots of funny stuff. Anyway, in doing it through the automatic RSS feed, it's instantly done that basically yet again. I've already been striked twice. Hate speech and medical misinformation were the 2 complaints. And yeah, that's it. Again, I don't care if I get kicked off of YouTube, but I just wanted to let people know that it is up there again if you're interested and you want to share it that way, although I don't recommend it because I'm not a YouTube fan. Either way, thanks for listening as always, ladies and gentlemen, and I will catch you on Wednesday. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.